The Lost Art with Andrew Cox podcast. Marine Corps League and Till Valhalla Project Ambassador. Now streaming on all major podcast platforms. Thanks for tuning in to the podcast that has given a voice to our veterans. The Lost Art with Andrew Cox. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Lost Art Podcast, that podcast giving a voice to our veterans. I'm your host, Andrew Cox, and today we're having a veteran story. But before we get into the episode, are you enjoying the podcast? Make sure you hit up the website. That's thelostart.podbean.com. Go check us out, see what we're all about. There's a couple ways you can help support the podcast. You can become a patron with a monthly donation, or you can just go in and get you some cool merchandise. Both of those helps in getting our veteran voices out for all to hear. I want to give a big shout out to the Till Valhalla Project. They're out there doing amazing things. I know for most of the military folks out there, you know what Till Valhalla Project does and what they're all about. But for those that don't, make sure you go hit up their website. That's tillvalhallaproject.com. Oh, I made a mistake. .com. All right, here we go. Are you a Marine veteran? Are you missing that bond you had on active duty? Then I have a place for you. Join the only congressionally chartered Marine Corps Veteran Service Organization, the Marine Corps League. Get that brother and sisterhood back in your life. Become one of the fewer, the prouder, a Marine Corps League member. All right, we are back. I got Marine retired Colonel Dan Wilson. Dan, how you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Andrew. How are you?
Oh, man, I couldn't be any better, except for this cat is slapping me with her tail. Other than that, I'm doing really good.
If I was any better, I'd be Dan Wilson. Oh, I am Dan Wilson.
Oh, man. Hey, how about that, huh? I love it. Well, hey, I guess I want to start at the beginning. Where'd you grow up? I know it's a little interesting story for you, so I'm excited to hear all about it. But where'd you grow up, and then how did you get into the military service?
I grew up in Africa, Andrew. I'm more African-American than any other African-American I served with in the Marine Corps. I spent my entire childhood growing up in Africa, in the countries of the Sudan, Kenya, South Africa, and Namibia. My parents were missionaries. My dad was a school teacher / preacher. My mom was a medical doctor, and they were over there providing free service to the tribes people in the various areas they served in Africa. So I grew up with a variety of different experiences, from avoiding getting killed by a black mamba snake in South Africa to other snakes in the Sudan, climbing Mount Kilimanjaro when I was 14 years old, learning how to swim, dodging crocodiles in the Nile River. We lived in our first house in the Sudan, literally right on the bank of the Nile River. And so that's where I learned to swim. I was kind of like a version of Tarzan, but my name was Dan, not Tarzan. And it was a perfect, basically, I learned to hunt and stalk with a Bushman friend of mine who was, they're one of the tribes that has the best stalking and hunting skill. And so it was a perfect backdrop in training for becoming a United States Marine. And I kind of got mercenary mixed up and ended up in the Marine recruiter's office. And here I am. I initially went enlisted, and I was an enlisted Marine with the MOS of 2632 electronic intelligence. And I loved that job. It was a great job. But when I became a staff NCO, or actually an NCO, I wanted to get into an officer program. And I wanted to be an infantryman. And they said the only way that you can be an infantryman, because your MOS is so short, is to become an officer. So I got into the MESEP program, Marine Enlisted Commissioning and Educational Program, which is where if you're selected, you're full-time job is to go back to college and get a college degree. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I got accepted into that program as a sergeant, and I selected to go to the University of Arizona in Tucson, Arizona, only because I knew that the heat index there was similar to Africa, where I'd grown up. And so I went there for 2.5 years. It only took me 2.5 years to finish my college degree.
Wow.
And when I graduated, I went to the basic school, and because I was third in my class at graduation, I was able to pick the MOS that I wanted, and that was infantry. And I went to the infantry officer course, and while I was there, I was selected as the Wheeler Award recipient, which is it's an award by your peers on the guy you'd most like to go to combat with. And
Okay.
the guy that gave me that at the time was Major John. Oh man, the guy it was the chief of staff for President Trump last time.
Chief of Staff for Trump.
Yeah. They had a big falling out there after he basically resigned.
Yeah. Was it Kelly? It wasn't Kelly.
Yes, John Kelly.
Was it Kelly?
Sorry, there
Okay.
you go. Just had a temporary old age, or probably from one of my TBIs. Sometimes my memory is
that
there.
happens. Yeah.
So,
well, hey, if you don't
anyways,
mind, I want to go back and talk a little bit. Like when you joined the Marine Corps, you go in enlisted. Boot camp for you must have kind of been a breeze. When you look at all the experience that you had in Africa and things like that, I imagine that boot camp wasn't too difficult. And if I'm not mistaken, you came out honorman when you left boot camp as well.
I was picked as the guide because when I went to boot camp, I had 2.5 or 2 years of college under my belt already. So I was one of the older recruits at age 20. And the drill instructor selected me right off the bat to be the guide. So I was the guide at graduation, and I was also the Iron Man. I was the fittest guy in our series, and I was the only guy to make it through the swim qual to the water survival qualification, which back then the final event to become qualified, and there were 3 of us that were left at that point in the pool. Was an hour treading water, where the drill instructors come in teams and try and screw with you and not drown you, but poke your head under and just kind of screw around with you until and then they rotate every 10 minutes, but you're in there for the full hour. And so 2 of the other 2 guys tapped out, and I was the sole survivor out of our company after that for the WSQ swim qual. But that I attribute to the fact that, swimming with crocodiles didn't deter me. So swimming with the drill instructors was not a big deal. Anyway, I did really well in boot camp, and I was a meritorious promotion to PFC. And then I did really well at my MOS school, Military Occupational Specialty School. And I was promoted twice, promoted meritoriously to Lance Corporal after 4 months, and promoted meritoriously to Corporal after 8 months. And then when I checked into my first duty station, I was sent to NCO school. I was a newly promoted corporal, and I got the highest score out of that school that they'd gotten 99.6. And so right after that school, and I'd run the only 300 PFT at that. It was at Cherry Point, so it was the air wing there, and I'd run the only 300 physical point fitness test of anyone in the previous 5 years. So right after that school, they sent me to a meritorious promotion board, and there were 10 sergeants major in the room, and there were 10 of us corporals, and they were only picking one. And quite frankly, I think they picked me because I was the last one, I was the last one in line to go in, and they had me march the crew into the room there, and the sergeant major heard my command voice, and and they knew that I had just aced NCO school pretty much, and I got selected for sergeant and was promoted to sergeant
Good Lord,
16
get out
months
of here.
from the exactly 16 months from the day that I graduated from boot camp, 2nd of
Wow.
February 1983. And it was shortly after that that I put in for the MESA program and got accepted into that. And then when I graduated from the infantry officer course as a second lieutenant, I was assigned to 1st Battalion 5th Marines.
Okay.
And literally within a couple of months, we were over in the desert. We were the 1st Infantry Battalion in August of 1990 to be sent into Desert Shield. And we
Wow.
trained for the next 7 months, day in and day out in the desert.
Yeah.
I initially
Now
was
you were a platoon commander, correct?
I was
For
I was
heavy
initially
weapons?
a Dragon platoon commander, which was
Oh, Dragon.
anti-armor.
Okay.
And that was considered huge because we thought when we first got over there that the Iraqi troops were going to come down into the Saudi oil fields. So we
Right.
were literally the first line of defense against that. And the Dragons platoon would have been a big factor in halting that advance. But as it turned out, they decided to stick with staying in Kuwait. And so I was, my company commander fired the heavy machine guns platoon commander and made me the heavy machine gun platoon commander, which was probably the most coveted billet of the lieutenants in the battalion. You were
Oh,
kind of
okay.
like the eyes and ears of the battalion out there on your own, kind of like rat patrol, screaming through the desert in our brand new Humvees. And
Nice.
it was an awesome billet, probably the billet that I treasure, the most, looking back on all the different billets that I held. And
Yeah.
I had an awesome group of Marines, and some of whom I still am in touch with, even after 35 years. And it was awesome. And all we did for the next 7 months was train for war. And we finally got the word in February of 1991 to go in. I was part of Task Force Ripper. We had 2 battalions side by side in Task Force Ripper, 1-7 on our right flank that was commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Mad Dog Mattis. And so I fought side by side in the Gulf War with Mad Dog Mattis. And
Very cool.
again, I was with 1-5, and Task Force Ripper was the main effort for 1st Marine Division. And our mission was to go high diddle straight up the middle into Kuwait and take on the 2 impenetrable obstacle belts. Saddam Hussein was telling the world that his 2 obstacle belts were impenetrable, but we cut through the first one like butter inside of an hour because we had trained for it. We had specific tactics, techniques, and procedures that we had trained for during the lead up in Desert Shield to Desert Storm. And so we executed, and we went on the second belt, went through that. And then the next 4 days, just kind of a blur because we didn't get any sleep at all. We were just kind of on the move the entire time until we got up into Kuwait City.
Wow.
And and as soon as we got in there is when President Bush, the first Bush, got on the hook and said, halt the dogs of war. Enough is enough.
Yeah.
Mission accomplished.
Wow. So you were literally the tip of the spear for that whole movement.
Task Force Ripper, yep.
Yeah.
And heavy machine guns, we led our battalion, so we were the first in and engaging the enemy.
Wow. And then I'm assuming that your first combat action ribbon came to you then.
Yeah, I got a combat action ribbon. I was put in for a Bronze Star with V, but politics and the awards board, I ended up with the Navy Achievement Medal with Combat V.
Oh, wow. That's quite a bit of a drop, though. But you're right. The
Yeah,
politics does play a lot into
there's a
the
huge
awards.
there's
So,
huge politics, and it kind of depends on what battalion you were in. Some
oh
battalions
wow.
would put guys in for bronze stars and silver stars, and the very a sister battalion like 1-5 and 1-7 and 1-5. Just because of the battalion commander's philosophy, he'd put those same awards in as NAMs and Navy comms. So you know, and then you had battalion commanders like the one I had who put himself in for or he tried to have the adjutant write him up for a silver star with combat V, and it was ridiculous. And the adjutant, who was a friend of mine, he was my roommate, refused to do it. So he ended up putting himself in for a Legion of Merit with combat V, which he got, which was
Wow.
crazy. I have some good stories, and I've written seven books here recently, and one of the books I've written is Out of Africa and Into the Core, and I
Hmm.
talk in there about some of the crazy displays of his nonsense that indicated to me that this was not the kind of leader I wanted to follow, and was the worst leader that I served under in my entire time in the Marine Corps. When we first got to the desert,
Wow.
when we first got over to Saudi Arabia, we were in this warehouse for a week before we went out in the desert. And he would
Hmm.
have meetings with the officers. He had a little area up the front of the warehouse, and he would pick out of a ice cold cooler a Coke. And this was when they were giving us 2 1-liter bottles of lukewarm water a day, when we were supposed to
Yeah.
getting 2 gallons a day. And he's sitting there sipping ice cold Cokes while he's telling us about what we need to do, and how we need to take care of our Marines. It's like I just wanted to rip him apart, man. It was like, are you kidding
Yeah.
me? And
Wow.
then we got out to the desert, and we had one Marine who had a leg injury on a formation run, and so he forbade any type of formation runs. And then I one day shortly after that, I'm headed to the battalion headquarters, and I see him running around the battalion camp there in purple shorts and tennis shoes, and it's like, what?
What?
And the other one I'll talk about is the night of January 17th, 1991. Of course, that's when they started the air war. He called us all in and was talking to us, and he was going to have the operations officer, whose call sign was Dealer, give us a
Hmm.
debrief on the air war and what was coming up. And so the major gets up, and most of everyone in the tent was a captain or a lieutenant, and
Right.
he starts berating the major because his mustache, he didn't feel the major's mustache was trimmed properly. And
Oh, jeez.
instead of us hearing words of wisdom from our leader before we're about ready to go into combat, all we heard was him berating his own opso and then telling the rest of us that we need to make sure that our Marines had proper grooming. And we had no
Wow.
electricity out there. We had no way of even cutting their hair at the time, and it was just ridiculous. And the other time, the one time he came out, because as heavy guns, I was always about half a mile to 3/4 of a mile in front of wherever the battalion was at, just kind
Right.
of to be like eyes and ears. So we were constantly moving around. He came out to visit me one time, and he said, what can I get you there, Lieutenant Wilson? And I'm like, um, our guys' boots are shot. We need some boots for the Marines, and he promised to get me boots. Never did. So what I did was I had a gunny of mine go to a nearby army base and bribe some army logisticians with some cans of Copenhagen that I'd gotten from the states,
Nice.
and we got some boots. So that was the way we got our boots for our Marines, but it certainly wasn't due to
Wow.
the battalion commander. Anyway, he was a horrible leader, but he ended up because of his Legion of Merit, he came back and he ended up retiring as a major general, and
Oh, wow.
was the CG of Marine Corps Recruiting Command. Years later, when I was a major in charge of a recruiting station, so I interacted with him a couple of times when I was later on a major, and he was a major
Yeah.
general in charge of Marine Corps recruiting. But I talk about it in my book. I had a shirt made up that lists all my different books. But out of
Oh, very
Africa,
nice.
out of
Yeah.
Africa and into the Corps is the one that talks about specific.
That's your latest one that you did. Is that right?
That's one of my most recent. It's not my latest
Yeah.
one. My latest one was called Pickleball Battlefield. I've gotten into pickleball in the last couple of years in my retirement because I just fell in love with the sport and got addicted to it, Andrew. And
Yeah.
one day I was out there playing, and I was thinking, if I was playing with a warrior from the past, say like Genghis Khan, what would his style of play look like as opposed to Sun Tzu? And
Yeah.
so I wrote a whole book called Pickleball Battlefield, where I take each one of the guys I studied while I was in the Marine Corps, and if they were my partner, like the Desert Fox Rommel, this is what his pickleball game would look like. The Swamp Fox Francis Marion, this is what his pickleball game would look like. And I do that with 21 different. And then at the end, I wrap it up and I said, if you play pickleball and you're following Marine Corps warfighting doctrine, this is what your game would look like. And I give a couple pages on that. And I also
That's really cool.
throw in there how to look at playing pickleball through the lens of OODA loop, John Boyd's OODA loop. Observe, orient,
Right.
decide, and act, and going through that, and to talk about how, if you have a quicker OODA loop than your opponents, you're going to probably prevail in the pickleball game.
Yeah. Ah, wow. That's really cool. Man. So after you finish your deployment with 1-5, what happened to you then? Like, where'd you end up going?
I still had a couple years left in 1-5. We immediately redeployed to Okinawa to
Oh, wow.
replace a
Okay.
battalion over there that have been stuck. It was the only battalion that wasn't deployed to Desert Storm. They were stuck in
Oh, wow.
Okinawa for a year. So we went over there and replaced them right away. And then after my first infantry gig of 3 years, I was selected to go be a Marine Detachment Commander on USS Kitty Hawk. Our
Oh,
mission
that is
initially
awesome.
was to protect and to guard the special weapons, the nuclear weapons on board.
Right.
But that mission changed under Bush because he was the president that said, "I'm taking nuclear weapons off aircraft carriers specifically."
Right.
So our mission then changed to being the carrier group, the Kitty Hawk carrier group takedown force. So I
Oh,
retrained my
wow.
Marines. I went to HRST school, helicopter rope suspension training school, and learned
Mm-hmm.
how to put Marines in. And I took a couple of my staff NCOs. And so we got the captain of the ship to buy us a bunch of fast ropes and all the equipment that we needed. And we used the Navy Seahawk helicopter that they had. And when we stripped it out, we could put a squad of Marines in there. And
Wow.
we practiced that. We never actually did an actual real life in the 2 deployments that we were in the Persian Gulf. We came close a couple
Mm-hmm.
of times. But it was a really fun job, and the Marines love doing that job
Oh, yeah.
versus just specific guard duty for nuclear weapons. And
Mm-hmm.
I also developed a silent drill team. So whenever we pulled into port,
Oh,
we would put on a display on the flight deck of coming in and like jumping out of or fast roping out of the helos and forming a perimeter, and then an hour or so later, we put on a silent drill team display in our dress blues.
wow.
And the skipper, there were 3 of them during my time there because I was on board the Kitty Hawk for 3 years, and
Oh,
they
wow.
loved me. And one of them took me under his wing and brought me up for a year and taught me how to pilot. In other words, skipper the aircraft carrier. So
No
I'm one of
kidding.
those.
Wow.
I'm one of the few guys that has a certificate of being a conning alongside officer and able to literally drive or pilot an aircraft carrier. And
That's amazing.
I really enjoyed that tour. After that tour, I was sent to Quantico as a captain to go through a career level school.
Okay.
I had hoped to go to the basic school, but instead they sent me to some comm school that they had renamed into the command and control systems course. And they
Hmm.
were using 4 of us infantry officers that year as guinea pigs to see if we could make it through. And of course, we all made it
Okay.
through, no problem. And then after that, I was sent back to the fleet as a company commander. And I was
Okay.
initially headquarters of service company for second time 4th Marines at Camp Pendleton, and
Yeah.
shortly thereafter, I was made Gulf Company commander, and
Okay.
we were the company that was supposed to be um, proficient in deploying or being deployed out of helicopters. So we did a lot more helicopter work there, and I got to
Right.
jump out of a bunch more helicopters in that billet, and a couple more deployments. Love that job, and got
Not
selected.
on those deployments for those floats, you just like Okinawa. What did you
Yeah,
end up doing there? Yeah.
31st MEU, usually
Gotcha.
come into Camp Hansen and become
Hmm.
part of 31st MEU and hit exotic places like, stop in Singapore and over in Australia, um,
Hmm.
Townsville. We got some libo in Townsville, and we got to do a fire support exercise with the Australian Army
Nice.
on an island right off the coast of Australia there. And during my libo, I got to scuba dive off the Great Barrier Reef. It was incredible libo, and it was an incredible deployment. Um, and I don't think I mentioned during my enlisted years, I made 2 deployments um, with the VMAQ 2 squadron. Um,
Oh,
I was
okay.
elect I was electronic intelligence analyst, and my job with them was to look at all the electronic data that the E-6B aircraft recorded in flight and
Hmm.
identify what missiles and what radars they were associated with and where they were located. It was a really great
Wow.
job, but I deployed twice to the Far East with that squadron, and in those deployments, we made it to Okinawa, we made it to the Philippines, South Korea. I was promoted to sergeant in February of '83 in South Korea, Daegu,
Mm. Oh,
and
wow.
then there's not time for it here, but there's some great stories from my time enlisted time over there. Like the day I got promoted, I was playing ping pong with the South Koreans, and I was a really good ping pong player. Kind of
Yeah.
like Forrest Gump. I was a bit first time 5th Marines champion ping pong player. So
Nice.
I was in South Korea, and I was playing these. They wanted me to do a little ping pong diplomacy with some of the South Korean soldiers, so I was. And there was this one kid that I saw an officer whisper to him before he played me, and he beat me the first game. I beat him the second game, and then the third game came down to a tie, and I ended up beating him. And the officer called him over. I was a sergeant at the time, and I was just stunned. But the officer called him over and started slapping him.
Whoa.
And he was like, "You embarrassed the country of South Korea by letting this Marine sergeant beat you. What the hell is your
Wow.
problem?" And, and I'm like, "Dude, we're just playing a game here." But that was back in '83, and that's the way officers treated enlisted in the South Korean military. It was just like
Yeah.
it just blew me away. But yeah, I had two good deployments when I was enlisted with VMAQ 2. So
Hmm.
all in total during my career, I had 11 deployments, 11 sea service deployment ribbon deployments, and
Wow.
after I was a captain, and I was selected for recruiting duty after I graduated from the Marine Corps Command and Staff College as a distinguished
Yeah.
graduate. They pulled me for recruiting duty for 3 years. I had recruiting station in San Diego, and right after that, I got selected to go to the MEF headquarters and be in the operations department. So I deployed
Okay.
with them in August of 2004. And initially, I was a future operations planner, and we started planning for Operation Phantom Fury, which was the second Battle of Fallujah. If you remember, the
Right.
first Battle of Fallujah was Operation Vigilant Resolve.
Yeah.
That didn't go very far because of terrorist propaganda. They were able to make some propaganda videos that got the national command authorities worried that we were getting bad publicity around the world. And comes to find
Right.
out, it was just all propaganda stuff, just made up stuff. You see Hamas do a lot of that stuff. And so they called off the first Battle of Fallujah in April of 2004. We started planning for the second battle. And initially, it was going to go down on the 29th of October 2004. But again, the National Command Authorities second guessed us and said, hey, we have an election coming up in a few days. We don't want anything to interfere with the election coming up in 2004. So we held off, and we didn't start that battle until 7 November, after the election was pretty much decided. And
Right.
we went in, and I went in. I had been part of the planning effort for Operation Phantom Fury, and after we were done, the MEF chief of staff came in and said, hey, do you want to go out into the battle? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, well, go down the armory and pick out any weapon you want. I picked out an MP5, and you're going to go
Nice.
be the senior liaison with the Army's Blackjack Brigade. So I rode
Okay.
shotgun. I rode shotgun with the Colonel Formica, an Army brigade commander, and everywhere he went, I went and helped him out whenever he had anything he needed to interact with the Marines with. And
Yeah.
we did the Battle of Fallujah, Operation Phantom Fury, and after that battle, they gave me a Glock 19 pistol for appreciation, and they also gave me the Order of the
Nice.
Combat Spur. They wanted to give me a combat infantryman badge, but my chief of staff said, no, we're not giving a Marine and Army award like that.
Yeah.
So they gave me the Order of the Combat Spur, Andrew, which means that any future formation for the rest of my life, I can show up in boots with their combat spurs on my boots. And that was
No
kind of a
kidding.
cool distinction. I doubt I'll ever go to one of their formations, but I'm authorized to wear the combat spur if I ever do. So
That's amazing.
I got back from that little gig in the town of Fallujah, and back at MEF headquarters, they said, okay, well, we need a current operations officer, usually a colonel. I was a very junior lieutenant colonel, but I got to
Yeah.
be the operations officer for initially it was General Conway, and then it was he turned over to General Sattler, and
Yeah.
then it became General Zilmer. And I have parts of 2004, 2005, and 2006 that I spent parts of those 3 different years for a total of cumulative of about a year in Iraq as the
Wow.
operations officer. They also made me the unique billet of the MEF briefer. So anytime we had Codels like congressional delegations, like
Right.
Senator Clinton came over, and I got to brief her, and
Oh, wow.
her Secret Service agent really liked me and gave me a 100-year anniversary coin. I got to brief John McCain, and
Wow.
I remember him. I got a picture with him, and he kept singing this tune called "Bomb, Bomb, 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 Iran." Remember that?
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. He didn't sing it. He didn't sing it when he was out there, but I got the brief. I got the brief in. But lately, I've been thinking about that tune as I see what's going on there in Iran and
Yeah.
Israel. And
Yeah.
I got the
It's
brief. I got to brief Senator Kerry literally the day after Christmas, which would have been probably a month and a half after he had lost to President Bush in the presidential election, the one that we
Wow.
withheld going into the Battle of Fallujah. And
Yeah.
everyone before I briefed him was like, "Hey, you got to say something, like you voted for him before you voted against him." There was that big campaign slogan that
Yeah.
people were using against him during the campaign. But I had to keep it professional with everyone, so I just kept it to the facts. So
Yeah.
I left the MEF, and before I left, General Sattler wanted me to write. General Sattler made me. They were having the first ever free elections in Iraq
Hmm.
in 2005, and he
Right.
called me into his office one day, and he's like, "Dan, I'm going to make you the new commanding officer of the Spartacus Battalion." And I'm like, "Okay, sir, what's the Spartacus Battalion going to do?" Your mission is going to be is you're going to collect from all these camps in the Al Anbar province the cooks, the computer operators, the bottle washers, and you're going to train them, and then you're going to surge them out in support of maintaining security for the first free ever elections on 30
Oh,
January
wow.
2005. So I did, and I was like, "Well, I'm your operations, I'm your current operations officer," and he was like, "You can multitask, do both." So I was doing both, and I had his blessing to pick whoever I wanted for my staff. So I
Yeah.
handpicked my own operations officer and all my staff, and we literally formed a battalion during combat to help provide security. And in the end, we ended up with 574 service members because we had everyone from Air Force folk to Army to I think Coast Guard was the only that we service that we didn't have. Um,
Wow.
and I surged. We brought them all to Camp Fallujah, made sure that they all had
Hmm.
all the proper equipment. We familiarized them with the weapons that they were going to use. Ran all kinds of weapons training and refamiliarization.
Right.
And then we had our lawyers come in and talk about the rules of land warfare and this, that, and the other.
Hmm.
And then I deployed 19 distinct groups to 19 different locations in the Al Anbar province, and they were out there to help provide security with the folks from First Marine Division that were commanded by Major General Natonsky. And
Yep.
he was so appreciative that. They were supposed to come back 2 days after the elections, and he on a VTC asked if he could keep them out there for an additional 2 weeks, which General Sattler approved. And they did a fantastic job, and I gave them each a signed copy of a letter of appreciation from the Spartacus Battalion Commander, Spartacus 6, with a watermark of an old movie. It had a watermark of a colored old movie of Spartacus holding up the sword.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
it
that's
was pretty
awesome.
cool, and the guys really appreciated that. And I remember when it was all formed and we were ready to deploy the guys out there to the 19 different locations. General
Right.
Sattler asked me to brief all of his commanders. So that included
Uh-huh.
General Natonsky. I think General Mattis was in the room because he was turning over to General Natonsky at the time. So
Hmm.
General Natonsky and General Mattis and the other wing generals and stuff. And I come into the room, the Combat Operations Center of the MEF, and I step up to the podium. I pull my pistol and hold it out like, "I am Spartacus." And my chief of staff thought I just gone crazy, and he was J.C. Coleman, John Coleman, legendary guy. May he rest in peace. He just died of cancer recently. But anyways,
Oh, man.
I proceeded to give the little spiel there, hour long brief on what we were going to do, and I certainly had their attention. None of them fell asleep
Yeah.
after that. But
Yeah, that's
it
one
was
heck of a gain attention, though.
yeah, and so after that deployment, at the end of that deployment, General Sattler asked me to write an article for the Marine Corps Gazette that he signed on to as well. And so I did, and it was in the July edition of 2005 Marine Corps Gazette, Operation Al Fajr, the Battle of Fallujah. And recently, I turned that into a book. I took that article and expounded on it a little bit. And as a 20-year anniversary tribute to all the Marines and servicemen that died in that battle, I decided to go ahead and write and publish. And so that's one of the books here on my shirt. One of the 7 books, The Battle of Fallujah, Part 2, Operation Phantom Fury. And I published that at the beginning of this year. So that felt good because I specifically dedicated it to all those who gave their lives in that battle. It was a pretty fierce battle, Andrew. I mean, I would say it was probably the fiercest urban fighting that Marines had encountered since Way City back in the Vietnam War. And
I was over there in Ramadi on Blue Diamond when they tried to go in the first time and got pulled back out. And then I rotated out, and then shortly after that is when Fallujah 2 happened.
Yeah, we used to call. I went over to Ramadi a couple times for planning purposes, and my buddy, my good friend Roger Turner was over there. He was the current operations officer for General Mattis, and of course now Roger Turner is the CG of 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force in Okinawa, 3-star.
Okay.
But he was a good friend of mine. But we used to joke around I used to joke around with him that Ramadi, we called it Pink Diamond. Seemed like there were so many females over there. What with all the hospital workers and female doctors and nurses and stuff you guys had over there, we called you guys Pink Diamond.
I can see that. There's quite a few. Yeah.
But I've been a proud member of Blue Diamond on several different occasions. So yeah, I love Blue Diamond. Got a special place in my heart.
Absolutely.
So I left there and was selected to go to be the CO of Infantry Training Battalion at Camp Pendleton.
Nice.
As you know, there's 2 battalions that train infantry in the Marine Corps. One's on the West Coast, one's on the East Coast. I had the West Coast one for 2 years. I loved it. It was an amazing experience because all my guys that were instructors there were either coming from the war in Iraq or coming from the war in Afghanistan. And after I left there, I went to the National War College for a year, which is essentially the premier war college in the nation for the military. And that was an outstanding year where I met and made some really good friends. 2 of note were the Greek colonel Alka Stefanis, and him and I and the Swiss colonel became really good friends. And we were kind of like the 3 guys that sit in that theater and kind of critique everything, the old guys and the movie theater. We were kind of like that in our class. And a couple years after I graduated from there, the Swiss colonel was a 2-star general and invited me over to Switzerland. And I spent a week over there, and he took me around in his military helicopter and to visit different places in Switzerland. So there I am flying right out the window of his helicopter is the Eiger sanction. And it was amazing. And the Greek colonel, Alka Stefanis, went on to be the deputy minister of defense for Greece. And now I believe he's one of the provincial governors, selected by the prime minister to be one of the provincial governors. So that was a really good year at the National War College. And out of there, I was selected to go work in the Pentagon on the Joint Staff, where I served under 3 different Army generals. Very, very good Army generals, 2 of whom became 4-stars and were in charge of the Afghanistan effort. In fact, Scotty Miller was the last guy holding the bag, giving advice on what not to do, how not to leave Afghanistan. And
Yeah.
the administration did the exact opposite of what he was advising them to do. I'm certain of it because I got to know Scotty Miller pretty well when I worked for him.
Yeah.
And I had 2 great years in the Pentagon. I was in my second year, I was designated as the Afghanistan division chief. So all the all the guys I had SEALs, I had guys that worked under me from all different services, and all that we did was essentially carry the water for the forces in Afghanistan inside the Beltway to let them know what our guys in Afghanistan needed. So I had 3 different trips out to Afghanistan. I got to go to Russia, ironically, to brief the Russian generals on what we were doing in Afghanistan, and then at the end of that, sit through a lecture from the Russian generals to us on how they were successful in their counterinsurgency campaign in Afghanistan, and have to sit there and these guys think I'm stupid. They don't know how we know. I know how this ended for them, and it wasn't the way that they're describing. And it was just so hilarious that they were trying to give me some lessons to take back on how to do things like they did, and I'm like, oh yeah, okay. So I
That's
left.
pretty funny.
I got selected out of there to go command as a colonel, and that was Weapons Field Training Battalion down at Parris Island. That was another awesome 2 years down there at Parris Island. And that's kind of when I fell in love with this state, Andrew. And I decided, you know what, if I ever retire, I'm coming back to the state of South Carolina. So I'm sitting here in Myrtle Beach today, if you didn't know where
Very
I'm at.
nice.
And it's all because I fell in love with not just Parris Island, but South Carolina many, many years ago. And I was going to retire out of there, quite frankly, but the CG over in Okinawa contacted me right before I was getting ready to put in retirement papers and said, "Hey, I'd worked for him at Infantry Training Battalion. He ended up retiring ultimately as a Major General Padilla. He had he had 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, which was my old alma mater during the march up and from in 2003, and he was probably one of the greatest bosses to work for. So he contacted me and said, "I need a chief of staff. Come out here and work for me." At the same time, I had General Paxton contacting me about being his aide in the Pentagon. And in the end, we decided that it'd be better for me to go out back into the operational forces instead of right back to the Pentagon. So I went out, and General Padilla turned over to General Stacy Clarity, and I was his chief of staff for 2 years. And then I was going to put in my retirement papers. And the MEF chief of staff was an old friend of mine, Eric Mellinger, and he said, "Hey Dan, we need an infantry officer to go take over a special operations training group. They've kind of fallen by the wayside under the last leadership, and we need someone to square them away." So I went up to Camp Hansen from Camp Courtney, and I took over SOTG. That has to be the funnest job I ever had. I would literally, Andrew, look at the training schedule each morning and go, "Do I want to go shooting? Do I want to go jumping out of helicopters?" And then I would go do it. And it was just an amazing experience. And
that was a you did that for 2 years as well?
No. Just as I was finishing up my first year, Mellinger wanted me to go down to Australia and essentially be the guy that liaison between the Marine troops down there and the Australians. So I went down there, and what the Australians had was a reserve Navy commander, come out of retirement. He was a local businessman. And when he realized that I wasn't going to be a patsy that just signed off on him assigning contracts to his buddies and, kind of, it kind of looked like a lot of crooked stuff going on, right? And
Right.
when he realized I wasn't going to be that patsy, he did everything in his power to get me fired, to get me removed. And it took him, and I didn't even know what was going on. I didn't even know that he was sticking a blade in my back while he was smiling at me the whole time.
Wow.
So he successfully made some false allegations against me.
Yeah.
And I got a call from Eric Mellinger one day and said, "You got to come back." And I got back to Okinawa and I said, please launch an investigation so that you realize that this is BS and that it was only done because, he knew I wasn't going to be compliant in directing $1 million contracts to the companies or the people that he wanted. I was going to make
Yeah.
sure that it was done equitably and fairly. And he was like, you know what? And I asked to talk to the general, and I talked to General Nicholson, who I'd previously served
Hmm.
with in Iraq. Knew him pretty well. In fact, I was there the day that his headquarters got blown up about 150 meters from where
Mm.
I was at. And it not only wounded him severely, but it killed
Yeah.
his major Kevin O'Shea, or Kevin
Yeah.
Shea, who I had just met the same day that he got killed.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I talked to General Nicholson and I said, "Sir, I feel like you guys shot me on the battlefield and left me out to dry." And he was like, "Danny," he was the only person ever in the Marines to call me Danny. And he
Mm.
was like, "Danny, General Tulin and I kind of looked at it like you were in a minefield and we had to extract you quickly before a mine blew up and there was
Mm.
an international incident." And I respected that. And so I told him, "You know what? I want to go ahead and retire. I want you to help me expedite my retirement." And he said, "We'll take 2 days and come back and talk to me and decompress." And so I came back and he said, "We need senior colonels like you in the Marine Corps. There's some important billets. And in fact, there's important billets right now at Camp Lejeune. So I'd ask you to take another tour for the team." And so I decided,
And
you
at
know
this
what?
point, now, how many years had you been in at this point?
This was in 2016, so 35. At
Wow.
35 years. So he wanted to take me another twilight tour for the team. So I said, "Okay, roger that." And I took orders to Camp Lejeune, to Second Marine Expeditionary Force, which
Hmm.
was kind of a full circle because then by taking that billet, I had worked for all three different MEFs, a couple of them several different times.
Yeah, that's really, I don't think that happens for very many people to be able to say they worked for all three MEFs like that.
No.
I want to take a moment to talk about something important: getting the VA disability rating and benefits you've earned. The VA claims process is overwhelming and can feel like a maze. For a lot of us, just getting started is half the battle. That's where Brookside comes in. Brookside Veteran Services. We've got your six. Brookside has helped tons of veterans, just like you and me, take on the VA claim system with confidence. Whether you're filing for the first time, going through an appeal, or trying to get rating increase, they've got your back. Here's some of what they offer: step-by-step help with your VA disability claim, support with appeals and increases, a personalized approach that respects the unique services and situation, and the best part, no upfront fees. They only get paid when you do. Go see the website, www.helpvetusa.com. Contact Michael Irie, Veteran Services Representative on Facebook, or email michael.helpvetusa@gmail.com or admin.helpvetusa@gmail.com. The bottom line is, you served your country. You earned these benefits. Let Brookside help you get what's yours. Brookside Veteran Services. We've got your six.
So I got to Camp Lejeune. I took over as the operations officer for and I'll think of his name in a minute. And I was contacted by Headquarters Marine Corps, the 3-star in charge of manpower, and he said, "Listen, beginning of August, we're having a Brigadier General Selection Board. I need you to look over your records and make sure everything's up to date for the." And in my mind, Andrew, I'm thinking, of course, I'm not just going to be Brigadier General. I'm going to be a 4-star general. I'm going to be the commandant. I had all this pride going on in my mind. And, like they say, pride cometh before a fall. And a week later, I had a woman that made a false allegation of sexual assault against me. And this was in 2016, mid 2016, at the height of the Me Too movement.
Yeah.
So I was immediately raided by NCIS. They raided our house 2 different times. CID raided us once. They got evidence, and 6 weeks later, they failed to inform me that it was exculpatory, that it was not my DNA whatsoever. In fact, I didn't find out. My lawyers didn't find out until right before the court martial. So they launched not just 1 but 3 separate investigations on me, going back all the way to when I was a private in boot camp. And that one charge turned into 27 separate charges a year, 14 months later at my court martial. They even visited my first wife in Louisiana, and this NCIS, and I had divorced her. This is 2016. I divorced her in '86 when I was a sergeant. And so I hadn't even talked to her in the intervening 30 years. They did a cold call on her, and they said, "Hey, is there anything that you can give us on Dan Wilson when he was married to you that we can use in this court martial?" And she said, "I only have good things to say about Dan Wilson, and get the F out of my house." Then she contacted me through a friend on Facebook and let me know what had gone down. I had other Marines that contacted me. I had a Marine who in 2012, so 4 years prior, I'd taken to a court martial when I was a CO of Weapons Field Training Battalion, because he got caught in a CID sting or NCIS sting dealing drugs. And my hands were tied. He had to go to, do a summary court martial. And they contacted him 4 years later and said, when you worked for Colonel Wilson, do you got any kind of dirt that we can use against him in the court martial? And he says, Colonel Wilson was the greatest CO I ever served under, and he only did what he had to do. They tracked down a cute female Marine who was out of the Marine Corps in 2016. She had worked for me at Parris Island, one of 5 females that was in my battalion at Weapons Field Training Battalion. And they said, "We heard you're good looking. Is there any time Colonel Wilson ever came on to you in a sexual way that you can testify against him in a court of law, court martial?" And she also told them he was the greatest CO I ever served under. So they did all these shenanigans trying to find anybody or anything, and they came up with absolutely nothing. They had no witnesses that could ever point a finger at me and say Colonel Wilson was, this way or that way. They had no pictures. They had no evidence. The DNA was there were 3.2 trillion more likely matches to the DNA, male matches, than me. There haven't even been that many males in the entire history of mankind. And the only thing I believe, looking back on it, was that it was a jury of general officers, right?
Yeah.
And most people don't realize that a general's promotion goes through the Senate, and any senator can hold up. And I was a very high profile case, the most high profile case that had been around in the Corps for decades. And
Yeah.
those generals knew after the court martial that they had to do something, or they would never see another silver star, another star in their collar.
Oh, geez.
And so they picked one charge, one of the 15 felon, or one of the 16 felony charges, and 15 of them. There were a couple that were similar to the one that they said he was innocent. I'm innocent of this, and this, but pick one that was similar and said he's guilty of this. But instead of giving me the full sentence of 26 and a half years, they gave me 5.5 years, which to me was like, they knew I was innocent, but they also knew that if they didn't find me guilty of something, they would never be promoted. And so for their own personal careers, they threw me under the bus, but then all gave me a light sentence, thinking that that would help soothe over their guilty consciences for finding me guilty for
Right.
that charge. So I was in prison. I was in pretrial confinement because during the investigation, that I had sexually assaulted her. And her reason and motive was she was pissed at my wife, who had broken up their relationship and their friendship, and in a night where they were drunk texting each other one night. And she knew that the best way to get back at my wife was to throw me under the bus. So
Wow.
she made a bunch of rape allegations on me, and all of her stuff was not tossed out, but they found me innocent of everything that she had said that I'd done to her. And in the end, they found me guilty of the one charge, gave me 5.5 years. I spent nearly 3 years in 3 different brigs, starting with Camp Lejeune, Miramar, and Camp Pendleton. And then the appellate court, the first level appellate court, the Navy Marine Corps
Right.
Court of Criminal Appeals, looked at it and said, we don't see any facts, we don't see any evidence. And they threw out that one charge for factual and legal insufficiency with prejudice, which meant that the Marine Corps could never come back at me with new charges. Because there were a
Oh,
couple of
wow.
prisoners I served with at Camp Pendleton that had stuff thrown out, but not with prejudice. And if those words
Yeah.
are not specifically used, the Marine Corps lawyers just go rework the charges and take the individual back to court. But if it's with prejudice, then it's basically the court saying we don't want to see or ever see or hear again anything to do with Colonel Wilson. And in this case, it's a 1 in a million type situation. So I was finally released. But before I was released, the lawyers, the government lawyers, I feel kind of forced me to sign an agreement that was highly unfavorable to me. It mandated that I turn in my voluntary retirement papers, which I was probably going to do that anyway, but that I give up a board of inquiry, and that I give up my active duty paycheck until the Secretary of the Navy made a decision on my case. And the way I was looking at it, I'd spent almost 3 years in prison, and if I didn't sign the agreement, who knows how much longer I was going to stay in prison.
Right.
And all because the appellate court didn't throw out minor charges like sending a prank email, Andrew. The prank email saying we should go to dinner sometime. That was a charge that they didn't throw out. Which if I'm ever king someday, and I know we don't want any kings in America, but if I ever am king someday, I'm going to have the appellate court change that to where if you throw out the main charge, if you're throwing out the dirty baby, you most definitely have to throw out the dirty bathwater along with it, because there were 4 or 5 charges. One of them was being UA for 2 days, right? And they came about that charge because during the Christmas and New Year holiday period in 2016, the one lady who ended up accusing me of raping her asked my wife and I to take her down to MCAS Beaufort so that she could look around Beaufort for a house, because her and her husband were getting divorced. And my instructions at the time was I had no reporting instructions. All they said was if we ever need to contact you, be available and come in and talk to the lawyers or whoever you need to talk to. Other than
Right.
that, you can come and go as you please. They gave me an office over at headquarters, Camp Lejeune building, and they said you can come and go as you please. You do not have to report. So I don't know how they got that UA charge in there, because I was well within striking distance of Camp Lejeune, and
Mm-hmm.
but that's one of the charges that remain. And so when I was released from prison finally, I thought, great, I'll be able to retire and go off into the sunset. And
Yeah.
what they did was the lawyers for the convening authority drafted up an endorsement to my voluntary retirement, asking the Secretary of the Navy to retire me as a major and in the pay grade of a major, and with an other than honorable characterization of my service. It went up to headquarters Marine Corps, and the 3-star in charge of manpower said, no, I can't justify that, but I'll go with lieutenant colonel. So that went up, and that was right about the time where the Secretary of the Navy, they didn't have one. They'd been fired. Remember
Right.
that guy, Spencer for Hire?
Mm-hmm.
The one that refused to let Chief Gallagher out with honorable and keeping his seal pin, and President
Right.
Trump finally said, "Hey, let my guy go in the next few days before the end of the year of 2019." And Spencer for Hire, and he fired that guy. So
Yeah.
it was some pogue up there at the Department of the Navy with the title of the administrative chief, who circled what the Marine Corps recommended. And so I was retired on the 29th of February 2020. I was that day, the day I retired, I was the senior colonel in the Marine Corps, and I'd been the senior colonel in the Marine Corps for the previous year on the lineal list. But I was
Wow.
retired, and the next day I got lieutenant. I'm being paid still in lieutenant colonel pay, which
Wow.
it's significant. I mean, essentially amounts to a $2,000 a month fine for the rest of my
Yeah.
life, unless it gets fixed. And the only 3 people in the world that can fix it are the Secretary of the Navy, the current sitting one, the Secretary of Defense, or the President. And it'd be as simple as them saying, I rescind the previous decision to retire Colonel Wilson in the pay grade of a lieutenant colonel and with other than honorable, and I hereby declare that he is to be retired in the rank of a full-bird colonel, pay grade backdated to 1 March 2020, with an honorable characterization of his service. Because I would argue, if you look at my service record and take the blight of the court martial, which should have gone away after I was
Right.
exonerated, and you look at my career, my record, with a clear head and not prejudiced by that should have gone away. It's an outstanding record. My fit
Right.
reps had me geared up to be a brigadier general.
Mm-hmm.
I was meritoriously promoted. I was deep selected when I was a lieutenant, one of two Marines that were deep selected for captain, which essentially is a meritorious promotion in the officer ranks. And
Right.
it's just for the sake of my family, my 2 daughters and my wife, and my all the Marines that I promoted and awarded and served with. I at least would like to see the other than honorable turned into an honorable, and of course, for my family as well, the lieutenant colonel being paid in the pay grade of lieutenant colonel changed to colonel.
Right. Yeah, it
But
definitely should be. It doesn't even make any sense that they would do it that way.
But the problem is, no one wants to help out a guy who was accused of the sexual assault crime. And had I been accused of murder and been exonerated, everyone would be standing behind me, saying, "Yes, fix this guy's case."
Mm-hmm.
But false allegation of sexual assault, the stigma just sticks with you forever, and no one wants to help you
Yeah.
out. So essentially,
Wow.
what I decided to do, the first thing I decided to do, Andrew, was write a book about it, and I did.
Mm-hmm.
That was my first book. My first book is called Undaunted Gladiator, and I go through A to Z, purely on my case and
Right.
how it ended up, and all the things about the military quote unquote justice system that I believe need to be fixed. Things that are basic. Issues of fairness in our civilian judiciary that we do not have in the military justice system. Stuff like
Right.
a jury of your peers.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a given in the civilian judiciary. A jury of your peers.
Right.
In my opinion, there's why not in the military? Why not have a jury of your peers?
Yeah.
Because when you put it in a senior subordinate scenario like it was with me, I was one of the senior colonels at the time, so most of my jury members were general officers, and
Mm-hmm.
so you have when you have senior members evaluating something, they look at it in a different light or prism, or through a different prism than they do if they're your peers,
Yeah,
and
that's true.
they don't have the empathy for the situation that you're in if they're not your peers,
Mm-hmm.
because the peers are always thinking, this could be me sitting in this situation, you know,
Right.
and also the prism that senior officers look at it through also is what's best for the institution, not what's justice in this case, but what's best for the Marine Corps. And that's how I literally believe. And then in my case, I believe that those officers were like, what's best for us? Our promotion is going to be held up if we let Wilson go free. Because if you
Right.
talk to anybody that sat through that court martial, the after closing remarks, my team was jubilant. They were like, "Oh man, we have won this case."
Right.
One of my lawyers ran into a defense lawyer in the head of the bathroom, and the defense guy shook his hand and said, "Yep, you guys won the case. We know you guys won the case. There's no way that Wilson's not going free tonight." But
Mm-hmm.
the jury was looking at through it from a different angle, through a different prism. So my
Right. Yeah.
contention is why not? Can't the military have a jury of your peers? The
Mm-hmm.
other thing being that there was no one in that room that had my infantry MOS, so you can't even
Mm.
closely make the argument that they were my peers just because they were fellow Marines, because
Yeah.
it's a completely different Marine Corps that you grow up and live in if you're in the air
Mm-hmm.
wing as an officer or if you're in the infantry as an officer. And I know because
Right.
I've been in both. I've been on both sides. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I had a wing officer general. I had uh, everyone in there was definitely not my peer, and they did not
Mm-hmm.
have the same experience in the Marine Corps as what I did. And the other thing I found out after I got exonerated and freed was that when they selected folks for my jury, if someone said that they had an unfavorable opinion of me, they were
Mm-hmm.
good to go to be in the jury pool. If someone said that
What?
if someone said that they knew me and they had a favorable opinion of me, they were specifically excluded. I had a general and a colonel tell me that they were specifically excluded because they were my friends and they knew me. And there were others on there that knew me, but said that they had, in other words, they didn't like me. And
Yeah.
that was okay. So that's another point of contention with me. The other
Holy
things that I
crap.
bring out in the book Undaunted Gladiator is the fact that the judge in my case was best friends with the staff judge advocate for my convening authority, fellow colonels who had
Mm.
served on Okinawa together, running partners, best buddies. Because there were 3 times during my court martial where my lawyers asked that a mistrial be declared, and 3 times the judge, had to consider it, probably made a phone call to his butt buddy, and came back and said, no, we're going to continue with the trial no matter what. And
wow.
And I just could not believe when the prosecution introduced the DNA evidence, and it was just like, are you kidding? This is not even Wilson's DNA. There are 3.2 trillion other more likely males that it belongs to, and the only reason they brought it in the courtroom is because it was male DNA, and they wanted to create some type of doubt in the jurors' minds that, well, maybe it could be Wilson's because it's male. And it was my lawyers thrashed him on that point, and just on that point alone, that case should have been thrown out as a mistrial, because it was just the prosecution grasping at anything and everything they could, because they had nothing. They had absolutely nothing. It was an eye-opening experience for me, because I saw how horrible those prosecution lawyers were, how incompetent they were.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
anyways, and then another thing, Andrew, is the fact that you go into a military courtroom and you're not guaranteed 12 jurors. I only had 7.
Right.
It can go as low as 5. And then when
Oh,
they make
wow.
a decision on your case, when I was going through my court martial, they only needed 2/3 of them. So only 5 of the 7 needed to agree in order to convict me on that one. And instead of in a civilian judiciary, you need 12, and you need all 12 saying yes.
Right.
And so to me, that is just is something that there's no good reason why that you should not have 12 jurors in the military. They should be your
Mm-hmm.
peers, and they should be required to all agree and say yes on felony convictions that could get you life in prison. And
Yeah.
there's some other things that I mentioned in my book. I won't go into a long tirade about those, but it just opened my eyes. I had been a convening authority myself for a total of 7 years and 3 different billets. So, but I
Mm-hmm.
had only seen that one side of the justice system, and it wasn't until I was inside of it on the other side
Right.
that I realized, there's just a lot of things. And I heard one prisoner, Clarence Anderson, he was an Air Force major I met at Miramar, and he put it in the best terms I've heard it. And that is, you remember that pirate that the SEALs captured? They turned it into a movie
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
with Tom Hanks. And
Mm-hmm.
the SEALs escorted that pirate back to the federal district of New York, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the minute that those pirates, that they turned that pirate over the federal judiciary of New York, he had more rights, more legal rights than the very SEALs that risked their lives and escorted him back to the United States.
Right.
And I could go point by point and describe, though I've given you 3, but I have a whole laundry list of more that would just make you shake your head and go, no way. People just don't realize when their sons and daughters sign up. One right that Kirsten Gillibrand, the senator from New York, took away from
Mm-hmm.
folks in 2014 through the Soldiers and Sailors Act, that was a rider on the National Defense Authorization Act for 2014. In other words, if you don't vote for this, you're not getting your money. Essentially held the hostage, the military funding, unless that specific rider was passed, which it specifically said it was at the height of the Me Too movement, and her girlfriends in Congress were trying to stick it to the military men. And it was
Mm-hmm.
like, if you go into a court martial, and it's still in effect, if you go into a court martial and you're accused of sexual assault, you're not allowed to use your good military character as a defense. So if you have a he said, she said, that's all you got is your good military character, right?
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
what it also does, Andrew, is if you're going in, if and it's the only category of crime of being accused of, and you're not even you're not at this point. You're taking away the guy's presumption of innocence. You're
Mm-hmm.
just because he's accused of one crime, you're saying, okay, because he's accused of that, we're taking away this right for him to be able to use good character as a defense. And that is a specific violation of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, equal protection under the law. So if I'm walking in, if you're walking in next to me and you're accused of murder, you can use good character and I can't. That is so unconstitutional. And when a case gets to the Supreme Court, they'll strike it down. But until then, many guys are in prison because they weren't allowed, thanks to Kirsten Gillibrand, to use their good military character in any part of as their defense. It doesn't mean that if you have a good military character, you're going to be let off, but it's something for the jury to be able to consider that, in my case, I had, at the time of going into my court martial, 36 years of honorable military service. And
absolutely.
I could have brought in dozens of admirals, generals, folks that I had served with to testify to. This is definitely not the Dan Wilson that I saw, through my time serving with him. No, this is definitely not the Dan Wilson, right? None of that. I couldn't bring in my own daughters and my wife to testify to my good character. So they sat right behind me throughout the court martial, but they weren't allowed to get on the stand and testify to what an outstanding father I'd been or husband I'd been. So that's something that is tagged back to Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. Thank you very much, ma'am. And her and her girlfriends go to the bar every night and giggle about how they stuck it to the military man. Meanwhile, there are literally dozens of military men who probably were convicted based on the fact that they couldn't use any part of their military character as their defense.
That just amazes me. I had no clue that was even happening.
That's another thing that's got to go. Ultimately, my goal, Andrew, is one day to be able to sit in front of that congressional committee that makes changes to the Uniform Code of Military Justice and tell them, okay, here's what's wrong with it. Here's what needs to be fixed. And here's the changes that need to be made. And be able to do that. And so part of that was writing that book where, part of my mission in that book was to expose all these little things that seem, right and fair in the federal judiciary that civilians enjoy, but are taken away from military members. And so I kind of feel like my mission in life is to get that corrected at some point for all future members of the military to be able to enjoy those same rights and liberties. Because there's no military reason why that shouldn't, be that case. And I just want to mention one more thing about, the fact that you have a jury of senior officers, right? And how it can impact and jeopardize their career. I sat personally on a court martial in 2013 on a Marine staff NCO at Parris Island. I wasn't the senior member. There was a fellow colonel who was the senior member. And when we went into deliberations, him and I were making a head call in the bathroom, and he said, he whispered to me, it was just him and I in there, and he said, hey, Dan, I'm going to have to vote for him, for guilty for him, because I know you guys got the votes. You guys got the 2/3 votes to vote him innocent anyway. And I said, well, why are you going to do that? And he was like, because if my boss, who at the time was a female general, Brigadier General Loretta Reynolds, if she ever finds out that I voted for his innocence to not convict him, it's going to reflect on my fitness report and jeopardize my career. And so years later, when I went into my court martial, that was my existential thought was, you know what? If they do convict me of something, it's for that very freaking reason right there. Is because they're moral cowards and they want to make sure that their careers are good to go and they don't care about my career at all. And so, or justice be served in the case. And I had that in real life. So I knew that going in. And so, I wasn't completely shocked when they took one felony allegation, and then gave me 5.5 years. So
it's just amazing to me how it even comes to that. Like, and as much as the Marine Corps preaches, honor, courage, commitment, make sure that you're, making the right decisions and, those types of things. And then you have, not even a jury of your peers, but somebody senior to you, and they're worried about promotion. So they're going to do whatever's best for them.
So an undaunted gladiator, in my chapter where I talk about their decision, that chapter is titled "A Jury of Cowards." And then I explain it. So I got out of prison, and because of the malfeasance, and here's the other thing that really angered me was in the agreement that I had with the general, the convening authority at the very end for my release from prison. His sole action item was that I received no punishment for the remaining minor charges. His lawyers immediately reneged on that agreement, and in my endorsement, his endorsement to my retirement, that's exactly what they used. They said, "Oh, he was UA. He sent this crank email," and so I got severe punishment after he promised me no punishment for the remaining minor charges. And if my lawyers talked to his lawyers about that, and they said, well, he meant no more legal punishment. This isn't legal punishment. This is administrative punishment.
Oh, geez.
And that's why, in my mind, I'm advocating that, the new Secretary of Defense fire at least 95 to 99% of the lawyers out there in the military and hire grunts, infantrymen to replace them. We need more warfighters and less lawyers because they're a bunch of conniving bastards. And I tell you, I had so many dreams when I was in prison, Andrew, of meeting up with these guys in dark alleys. I still have those dreams from time to time, but I have a certain distaste in my mouth for lawyers and for NCIS, because those NCIS guys, they treated me as guilty, and they were going to find whatever they could to provide the goods for the court martial to make me look like I was guilty. And I remember an epiphany I had of their tactics was when I was allowed to watch before the court martial their interviews or their interview sessions with my two female accusers. Andrew, you would not believe, they literally coached, they helped these women come up with the most outrageous stories, giving them suggestions. Well, maybe he did this, that, and the other. You would, I mean, it would make an awesome Netflix show, taking the clips from that and going, this is what they consider justice in the military. So I have it's all because back in 2013, General Amos came out to all of us commanders, and I'm sure the same message went down to NCIS investigators, and that is if a female Marine is pointing a guilty finger at somebody on sexual assault, you got to believe her, number one, because of course they're always telling the truth, is the assumption. And number two, if they're being investigated for anything else, and I had this with one of my female Marines, for example, drug use. Forget about the drug use allegation and any other misconduct allegation and focus on the sexual assault. And that was trained. We were told in training sessions. I remember sitting in one with Brigadier General Loretta Reynolds, where we were specifically told that if you have female Marines and they're being accused of something else and they happen to bring up sexual assault, you stop investigating all that stuff and you focus on the sexual assault. And of course, you always believe what the female accuser is saying, no matter who the male person is being accused. So no matter that
Wow.
I was a colonel prior enlisted with 35 years of dedicated service, with umpteen number of fitness reports from umpteen number of reporting seniors. I had
Yeah.
I had 4 stars on a couple of my, I had General Neller as a reviewing officer on one of my fit reps, General Paxton, all of these guys, some of them even calling for me to be looked at for promotion to general. But yet, because of the time that it occurred during, they all went under rocks, and there was no one to help me out because it was during the height of the Me Too movement, and they knew that if any female senator got a sniff that they were helping out Colonel Dan Wilson on a sexual assault case, that would be the end of their career. So,
Wow.
even though at the time I was General Neller. I mean, him and I had served a couple times in combat, and we were not just fellow officers that served together. We were good friends. When I left the Pentagon, he called me into his office specifically, and he was like, "Dan, tell me how we win the war in Afghanistan." And I spent an hour telling him how we could win the war in Afghanistan if you followed Dan Wilson's plan. But
Yeah.
I felt like a complete betrayal by the General Officer Corps when I was accused. I did have a few active duty colonels that came and visited me. One of them's now a general, but for the most part, the senior leadership were like, "Oh hell no, I'm not touching Dan's with a 10-foot pole." So
Yeah.
so that was kind of disheartening. But what was heartening was the fact that I had dozens and dozens of letters while I was in prison from the Marines that I'd served with that said, "Sir, we believe you're innocent, that you're, this is injustice, a travesty of justice." And I had visitors, so many visitors. I had the biggest visitation list at every brig I went to. It would take me 4
Wow.
hours because you were forced to handwrite it out, and it would take me 4 hours to handwrite out my visitation list, and you were required to redo it every 3 months. So 10 different times, I had to handwrite out my visitation list, because if someone wasn't on your visitation list, they weren't allowed to come in and visit you. It wasn't like you
Wow.
were even if you were a congressman and you just showed up, they wouldn't let you in, as a reference to what's currently going on. So
Wow.
it was very heartening. In fact, one of the books I plan on writing is I have a copy of all those letters, and I'm going to do I'm trying to figure out a book, but an upcoming book that I'm going to work on and publish this year is called Triple OG. When I first got to Camp Lejeune's brig, one of the African American prisoners took me aside and said, "Sir, you familiar with OG?" And I'm like, "Yeah, original gangster." He's like, "Sir, you're so old though. We're going to call you Triple OG." So that was kind of my nickname while I was in prison, was Triple OG. So I'm going to
Yeah.
write a specific book talking about all kinds of stories from my perspective behind bars for 3 years as a full
Yeah.
bird colonel prisoner. And I have a lot of great stories to tell, real stories. And
Yeah. Absolutely.
it'll be a bestseller, probably be made into a movie.
Yeah. Well, you were talking about a Netflix special. Somebody does need to do a Netflix special about this whole thing.
Yeah, a good Netflix
I don't.
special also would be on my childhood and on the book Out of Africa and Into the Corps, my
Yeah.
childhood and career in the
Absolutely.
Marine Corps.
Yeah. Man. Well, I'm gonna do my best to try to hook you up with some people I might be know that could possibly at least know somebody to do it. So I'll let you
Or
know on
or
that though.
or hook me up with your buddy Pistol Pete. Get me 15 minutes in his office to kind of bare my soul, and because he was also accused of sexual assault, as you know, falsely accused of sexual assault.
Yeah.
Pistol Pete, current Secretary of
Yeah.
Defense. And I
That's right.
know that if I had 15 minutes of his time, I'd be able to convince him that he should do the right thing in my case. Of course, I believe that if if I had 15 minutes with either John Phelan or President Trump, I could do the same thing. So hopefully someday I'll be able to correct that and have justice, true justice, be resolved in my case.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, shoot, I can definitely try to shoot this podcast their way. I can email it and just say, hey, please take a listen. That way they can
Thank
hear
you,
your
sir.
story. But everybody needs to hear this story. I mean, it's incredible the craziness that you had to go through. I mean, it's amazing. Kudos to you for being able to do it.
If you read my book, Undaunted Gladiator, it's got the complete narrative on the case. And I tell you, Andrew, you get to the courtroom scenes, oh man, you'll be like, this needs to be in Netflix. This is so crazy. These two women
Yeah.
were the so crazy that even that judge who was best buddies with the SJA, at one point he said he kicked the jury out of the room, and he told this one lady, my first accuser, if you ever have another outburst like that again, I'm going to not only kick you out of the court, but strike all of your previous testimony from the record. And she had
Wow.
another one. She had another one, but he didn't have the balls to go through and kick her out. And
jeez.
it was crazy. Some of the things these women said, you'll just be going, wow, this is insane. This is nuts. And you don't even have to read the book, Andrew. I got it in an audiobook where I narrate it, and you can listen to me
Oh,
read
really?
it to you. In fact, I had a
Wow.
2-star general who just retired contacted me, and he said, I was out here near 29 Palms doing some work, and I was listening to your book as I was going on base and coming and going from Palm Springs. And it was like you were sitting in the car next to me. Good old times. Him and I go back to when we
Yeah.
were captains together. So any one of my
Wow.
7 books that I've published are also available on audiobook for you to listen to.
Now, is it all of them your voice doing it, or?
I narrate all 7 of my books.
Wow, that's
Yep.
awesome. I'll have to get with you offline on that, on how to, well, how you ended up doing that. So, anyways, I'll get after we're done here. I'll go back and talk to you about that.
Piece of cake, brother. Piece of cake.
Cool. Well, shoot. Is there anything else that you would like to cover that maybe we haven't?
Yeah, I just when I retired from the Marine Corps, I decided to get into a recovery, and I'm only bringing up this topic because I've had so many Marines that I've served with who have gotten out of the Marine Corps and struggle with PTSD, and
Right.
that's mixed with drugs that they get from the VA and alcohol that they don't get from the VA, and
Right.
other drugs that they don't get from the VA. And I've had all too many Marines that I find out have committed suicide, I believe, because of drugs and alcohol. And I determined when I retired from the Marine Corps that I was going to get sober, not so much from drugs, although my drug of choice as a Marine was Copenhagen. And so within a year of retiring from the Marine Corps, I got into a recovery program that I'm still in. So I've been sober 1,612 days now. But
Wow.
it really is a situation of for the grace of God. You know, I could be one of those guys who committed suicide. In fact, in my book Undaunted Gladiator, I talk about a couple paragraphs about when I thought of committing suicide and my thought process that got me out of thinking about and going through with committing suicide.
Right.
But I really attribute drugs and alcohol as being one of the main contributors to our military members that get out, and that's mixed with PTSD that they have, and from the military, or traumatic brain injuries that like I got when I was in Fallujah, blown up in an
Right.
IED, and that I had to get into a recovery program, and it's a spiritual recovery program. And so for
What's the
me,
name of it?
It's AA.
AA. Okay.
Alcoholics Anonymous.
Mm-hmm.
I got into that, but I used that
Okay.
program, the steps of that program, to quit nicotine,
Right.
Copenhagen. And I've been off that for 5 years. And recently I used it to get off caffeine, because I was literally, since I was alcohol free and I was nicotine free, Andrew, I was literally getting drunk on caffeine. I would
Wow.
have a cup of coffee in the morning, and I would get so buzzed I'd be like, and then I would transition to energy drinks, and I'd drink C4, and I'd be like, wow.
Wow.
And but what I found was that I would crash, and I would always need more, just like alcohol. I couldn't get enough
Right.
alcohol, whiskey. I couldn't drink enough whiskey. I was always wanting more.
Mm-hmm.
And I never thought I was an alcoholic, because I could go on a deployment for 6 months and or deploy to the desert for 7 months like we did in Desert Storm and not have a drop.
Right.
And so I never thought I was an alcoholic, and it wasn't until I retired and got into AA that I realized that I am an alcoholic. Not only that, caffeine changes the reason I drink caffeine. Recently, I realized was just because it changes the way I feel. And
Right.
but then it gets to a point where I crash in the afternoon, or I'm playing
Mm-hmm.
pickleball, and the caffeine goes out, and it's just screwing up my game. And so I decided that even caffeine had to go out of my intake. And so
Right.
I now do not have any sodas or anything that's got caffeine related, and I feel so much better. I sleep so much better. I play pickleball so much better. Believe it or not, my hand speed, my reactions are so much quicker
Hmm.
when they're not being masked. Initially, they're kind of enhanced, but then as the caffeine wears off, as you continue to play game after game, and it wears off, they get worse, not better. Whereas without
Right.
caffeine, they're good, and they stay that way consistently all the way throughout the games that I play. So
Right. Yeah.
what I did was at the beginning of this year, I thought, you know what? I'm not going to write a book so much as to preach and to tell people how they need to do it. I'm just going to simply share my story, and they can take whatever they want from it. So I wrote Dan 2.0 at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning of this year, where it's literally my recovery story from alcohol, nicotine, and caffeine. And I got stories
Wow.
in there, like the story I tell where when I was at OCS, I was so addicted to Copenhagen, yet you were forbidden from having it, that I had a lieutenant smuggle it into me in the dark of night. And I almost got kicked out of OCS because I was caught with Copenhagen. But that's
No
that's
kidding.
the desperation and the addiction that I had to the Copenhagen. And I
Right.
tell the story that the week before graduation, I got caught, and I got caught because another MESEPer I'd given a can to, and he got caught, and he threw me under the bus to the drill instructor when the drill instructor or the sergeant instructor said, "Hey, Boothby, where'd you get this can of Copenhagen?" He was like, "Oh, I got it from Candidate Wilson." And so Gunnery Sergeant Morgan came
Jeez.
over to me, and he's like, "Is that right? You're going to see the man tomorrow." And the man at the time was Colonel Reinecke. And I went the next day. And the next morning, right before I went in to see Colonel Reinecke at OCS, the CO of OCS, 1987, we had a company drill competition
Uh-huh.
for the company. And I think there were 5 or 6 platoons. And I was the platoon sergeant that did the drill commands and everything. And we won the
Mm-hmm.
competition. And Colonel Reinecke was sitting in the bleachers there watching us. And an hour later, I'm in his office, and my platoon commander, Captain Taylor, a helicopter pilot, was saying, "Yes, sir, we got to kick him out, kick him out, kick him out. He
Oh,
violated the
geez.
rules." And Gunnery Sergeant Morgan went along with him. He was his platoon sergeant. And the colonel looks through my record. He's like, wow, I see you're meritoriously promoted to PFC, Lance Corporal, Corporal Sergeant, made Staff Sergeant in 5.5 years. You got a great record. I'm going to keep you. Just go away and sin no more. I was like, aye, sir. And I marched out of his office, went into the closest head and put in a dip of Copenhagen and walked back to the barracks. But
Wow.
5 years later, after Desert Storm, I ran into him. He was a major general then at Camp Pendleton. He was the CG of the base. And I was able to go up to him at the San Luis Rey Officer Club and thank him for saving my ass from kicking me out of OCS. So,
wow.
yeah, that I give a lot of good stories. And the title of the book is Dan 2.0, Recovering from My Addictions. And
I love it.
the addictions to alcohol, mostly whiskey. I was a big whiskey drinker. I remember Marines would say, what do you drink, sir? And I'm like, whiskey. And they're like, well, you cut it, do you put anything in it? And like, no, that's for pussies. I drink it straight. And, I was literally, as a infantry colonel, I was cultivating a tobacco chewing, whiskey drinking, old colonel that, hard as nails. I'd still get up early in the morning and do CrossFit workouts with my Marines. But when I retired, I realized this has got to go or I'm going to be standing in line for a liver. And I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah. It's a good point.
Not to mention I had shortly after retirement, a couple of Marines, one of who I'd actually been his retiring officer, a gunnery sergeant from Parris Island. And he had contacted me and asked for my help about recovery and actually went to a recovery center and got into a dog training program. And then a couple months later, his fiance said, I should have contacted you, but he committed suicide.
Oh no.
So the power of the alcohol brought him back into drinking. And he didn't want to call me because he knew I'd steer him back probably into another recovery center. So, he took his own life. So I figured, let me write a book about my story from recovery. And if it inspires just one person, I've mission accomplished. And
absolutely.
Any more other people, then that's gravy. And I got to admit, I got to tell you, affirm to you, Andrew, that I've had more than one person contact me and say that they've read my book, Dan 2.0, and that they have been inspired by it. So hopefully,
that's a win.
Hopefully, many more wins.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Well, definitely an impactful story that you've told today. Hopefully we can get it out there for more people to hear. And we're going to try to get it in the right hands and see where it goes. But thanks for coming on and doing this. I appreciate it, Dan.
Thank you for the opportunity, Andrew, fellow Marine. And if there's any way you can email me a link to it so I can highlight it.
I got you. Yeah, we'll talk about that after we close out here. But I can for sure do all that.
Roger that.
All right. Well,
thank you for the opportunity, Andrew. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Much appreciated. And Dan, you hit the nail on the head because I always end every podcast talking about veteran suicide and ways that they can reach out for help. Of course, the VA has great resources. You can always dial 988, press option 1. You can always text 838-255, or you can go to veteranscrisisline.net and click on that chat icon. But any of those options will put you in contact with somebody that can help you out. But remember, one veteran life lost is one too many. I care about you. I know Dan cares about you. The whole veteran community cares about you. So please reach out for help. And if you're out there, you're not struggling, reach out to the buddies you served with. Ask them how they're doing. If they need that helping hand, please give it to them. All right, Dan, one last time. Much appreciated. Don't go anywhere. Hang on. I'll bring you back in here in a couple of minutes. But to all the listeners, stay motivated. Change your socks.
All right.